I've heard one of those in a while, eh, Jim?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Jeez, I got a sore throat. Welcome everyone to Cisco's Virtual Kitchen. Today we're tackling inflation, menu inflation. We're talking about inflation. It's all over the news. It's everywhere in the industry. What was the last hot topic the other day? It was like a few months ago, Jim. Everyone was talking about. Was it inflation still? Or was it labor?
Though
Well,
we were talking about budgeting last time.
the budgeting. Well, now we're going to talk about inflation. Because if you budget right, you could probably deal with inflation, no problem. But I want to talk about this. We got a cool tool here that we were playing on a few minutes ago that we're going to bring up on the screen today. So if you are listening to this as a podcast, well, watch it on Spotify, and then you can watch it on Spotify if you go over there. But Jim, thanks again, Jim Taylor, Benchmark 60, legend. He knows everything about the industry. There you go. There you go, Jim. There's your intro.
Good plug. Thanks.
You like that plug?
Yeah.
So I want to. So Jim, you do a little bit of homework there? What's the inflation rate right now happening in our industry?
Well, when I was looking this morning, it was listed at, well, it said 6.9%. I mean, that's obviously as an average, right? There's going to be a lot of product. I think if I said 6.9% is the inflation rate, there'd be some restaurateurs that would go, wait a second, my oil is way more than 6.9% up, or my beef or whatever, but that 6.9 is the average.
So do they count that? That's just average, right? So we don't look at certain things. So if you're a steakhouse, you're probably going to have a higher percentage inflation. If you're in places that have certain things that are going up, like a deep fried restaurant that's got oil galore, those are going to be hits, big hits, right?
Oh, huge. Yeah. I mean, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head in terms of what oil has gone up, but I know that, beef, chicken, oil, I mean, all those things are double digit inflation right now for sure.
Now, what do you see before? We're going to cut to a quick commercial because we always do that. Before we get that, I just want to talk to you because this is such a great topic, and I remember dealing with this way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
When we used to say like 3% inflation rates, and people would freak, or 4%, and people would freak. And this is like bazillions of years ago when I started getting into helping restaurants. We used to bring this calculator up and we showed the amount of dollars that people would be losing. And I asked you this before we started today, this is money that restaurants are literally taking off the bottom line. Is that right then? Like this hits the bottom P&L?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if the way that inflation is right now, if you're running, what were we looking at earlier, 35 or 38% food cost, if you don't do anything to negate that, I mean, yeah, you're going to lose a couple points right off the bottom.
So that just hits your P&L on the bottom. Boom.
Gone. Yeah.
Boom. Now, before we go to a commercial, how easy is it? How easy? Because I always say you're not going to, like, you can complain till you're blue in the face. But how do people, because we love that, how do people work with inflation, though? Because I see some restaurants, they'll drop prices down on a special feature item, LTOs, all these things. They drop lower price, and then you go, how can they do that when inflation products go through the roof? Is it hard to manage inflation in our industry?
It is for sure, because I think what we see so many, especially independent restaurants doing right now, is they're just taking sort of a blanket approach, and they're just raising prices by $1.50, $1.50, whatever it might be, right? But I think in order to actually make an impact and negate what's going on, you got to do it strategically. There's layers to it, so it is a little bit complicated for sure.
So we're gonna help uncomplicate that. We can't even talk today. Wow. We'll be right back after this with Jim, and we're gonna uncomplicate. Oh my God, we're gonna make it simple, people. After this with Jim and inflation. Here we go.
Imagine both your front and back of house teams are so well trained that they're executing flawlessly. Your front of house is doubling your sales, boosting repeat business, and creating 5-star dining experiences, while your back of house is consistently preparing each dish to perfection, on time and to spec. Having a restaurant this dialed takes a unique training system. That's where Serve comes in. Serve means study restaurant variety, and it is a powerful, mobile training system, custom-built to meet the needs of your restaurant. Serve will up-level your team's knowledge and skills, maximize your profits, and create experiences guests will rave about. Serve is the key to unlocking your restaurant's hidden potential, and will prove that the more your team is able to learn, the more your restaurant will earn. It's Serve, and it's a game changer. Ready to serve? Get started at servenow.com.
All right, we're back, folks. Jim, you ready to do some math?
Yeah,
I can't. Apparently, I can't talk. So I'm just get right into the
math will be easier then. Love math. Let's do it.
Math will be easier. Here we go. So this is a tool, folks, that we use. Sure. At Cisco and stuff like that. This was created one of our teams, I think, in the prairies that created this tool. I used to use a different tool. It was way simpler than this. This is pretty fancy. But this, I think you said it the best, Jim. It shows people that it's as bad as it is, it's actually manageable in a way, right?
It is. And you know, this piece that we're going to go through here is specifically just looking at the menu price, just the food side of things. You know, this isn't looking at things like labor cost and some of the other things that are increasing, but this definitely will make it, hopefully bring some peace of mind to some operators that are worried about how much they need to increase menu prices based on the cost of food.
Yeah. It does. Actually, you made me feel a little bit better, to be honest, after we talked about this earlier. It's just really the dollar amount. Now, I'm going to want, before we get into this, Jim, I want to ask you a question. You said something about a lot of operators will go in there and they'll just slap $1 or $2 on stuff. Best practice, yes or no?
Well, I think it first depends on how much time are you willing to dedicate to it. Because if you've got the time to go through and do it properly, then no, it's not a best practice. I mean, if you only have the capability, you know, you're running short staffed and working a deep fryer and all that other stuff as the owner, then, you know, something's better than nothing. But there's definitely layers to making sure you do it right.
And do you see a lot of restaurants doing that in the marketplace? They'll just blanket everything with $1, $2. I've seen in the past, but you're seeing it out there now? Yeah, same thing?
Yeah, all the time it happens. $1, $1.50, 75 cents, you know, and they're talking about, I hear so much conversation about, is it better to stay at 95 cents than go to $1, you know, $15.95 instead of 16? There's all this conversation about that. Whereas, you know, spend that time working on what the right strategy is, as opposed to if someone's going to be having sticker shock.
Yeah, I always said, you know, like I remember working with restaurants and just dropping prices on certain things and driving traffic on that item. And then we were inflating another item higher than maybe what we wanted to, just to recoup the cost. It was almost like a chess move in a sense of what you want to do with your menu, right? Like it's not always up, right? Because people will notice. And I think today we're looking at the value of what we're trying to maximizing the value out of the dish for our guests. I'm glad we're talking about this today, because I want everyone just to make sure they understand is that you need to be aware of this, but just be cautious of just that sticker slap on there, because I don't know if you need to do that. We're gonna show you.
Well, and at the end of the day too, you know, food cost is important as a percentage, but contribution is even more important. Yeah. Right. I would rather, as a business person, I would rather sell a high food cost item that I make $10 on every time I sell one than a low food cost item that I only make $2 every time I sell one.
Exactly.
Right? So contribution is just as important.
There you go, Jim. Jim at restaurantowner.com. He's been preaching that for like 20 some years. Right. And it's so true. Jim, you knew back then and you know today. So
yeah.
It is absolutely. You know, why is it? I'm going to get into this before we get into this thing. I got to ask you so many questions. Why do you think we always navigate to food cost? Why do we always bring it up? Like it's like I always remember people would be like, hey, I got this percentage or this. Is it because it's a simple number and we understood it? Or
I think in my experience, it's because it's one number and not a number for every item on the menu. And it's because that's what shows up on the P&L. Right. So when you're just looking at the P&L at the end of the month and you see 25% food cost or 30% food cost or 35% food cost, and then you're talking with your other friends or buddies or people in the industry and they compare, you know, there's industry standard food cost, right? People have that conversation all the time. That's why it shows up that way.
I think it's that simple math, right? It's like what's in your pocket. I know this much, right? I spent this much. I know this much. And here's it is.
Yeah.
It's simple math. So anyways, okay. I always ask that because I have been having this conversation for many, many years around the whole food cost discussion. So it's one there's more to the picture. More to the story. All right, let's get into this funky tool here to show. Okay, So you tell me the numbers. I'll be your number guy here. I got you on the big screen.
Okay, well,
All right.
I mean, earlier you and I were talking about $1 million a year independent restaurant, right? So what's that put us somewhere around $80,000 a week?
There you go.
Oh,
85.
85. Nice. Okay, so 85,000 a week.
Yeah,
Let's
we wanna-
say
yeah,
the
let's-
average guest check is $35.
Now, is that what an average check is nowadays? Would you say?
I mean, it depends on the concept, but they're climbing for sure. I
Okay.
was actually talking with somebody yesterday about this, that they're, a couple of years ago, their average guest check was in the high 20s and now it's almost $40. So somewhere in that $30 to $35 range for any full service it's pretty average now.
Let me just pull this up closer so people can see here. Okay, here we go. Is that better? A little bit better there. I'm getting old. Jim. Guys,
I saw you with your glasses on.
here we go. Here you go, buddy. All right,
Okay.
so we got $85, $35 a guest check. This is your average month and day food cost.
Well,
Here we
let's say the cost is 35%.
You want 35?
I think 35.
All right, here we go. All righty. So what this show, and this is inflation. You said it's 6.9, so 7.
Yeah.
That's what the inflation rate right now is. Just on
Average.
food. On food.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll play around with that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what this says now is my food cost is going to jump from 35 to 37, almost 37 and a half.
Yeah, and the important thing, because we're in the business of making money, I would hope most restaurants, right? I mean, their cost is going from $29,750 to $31,803. So it's going up by, just over $2,000
Okay. A month.
a month. So, if you break that down, that's, call it almost $25,000 a year, right? That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Okay. Okay, Jim. Okay, I'm playing. This is good. Okay. So can we break it down to how much more per dish? Is it
Well,
possible?
yeah, I mean, you can get that granular for sure. And this is where, we see a lot of that sort of blanket, just add the same amount to every item, because this is saying that your old cost per dish was $12.25 and your new cost per dish is $13.10. So it's almost gone up by $1 per dish, right? 85 cents.
So that's where everyone's going. Oof, I'm just going to put everything up $1.50.
Put everything up $1.50, and there's a cushion there, right? But that, that gets a little bit complicated because you can't put a dish that's only $5 or $6 up $1. And if you take a $40 dish and only put it up $1, you might actually leave money on the table. So this is where, there's a little bit more strategy that comes into it. But the really interesting thing that I see about this is it's telling us that really what is happening is a 2.4% increase.
Or 85 cents.
Or 85 cents. So what that's basically telling you is that 2.4% increase doesn't mean you have to raise your menu prices by 10, 15, or 20%. It's only 2.4. So it is manageable. I mean, 25 grand is a lot of money a year, especially in a business that's doing $1 million. But there's opportunity to get ahead of this a little bit easier than what I think a lot of people are worried about.
So Jim, inflation's 7. I only have to increase my menu prices by 2.4. Is that what I'm reading here, right?
Yeah.
So why is inflation not? Why is it so? Why is it equaled out? I don't understand. Help me.
Well, because your menu is going to be priced in lots of different ways, right? There's probably tiers of pricing. There's different categories in terms of entrees, appetizers, that type of thing. And really, over the course of the month, you're just trying to negate that couple $1,000s in average cost, right? So if you were to take your menu price your cost price from $12.25 to $13.10, you'd be able to negate that increase. So it's a little bit more simple than people think. And what we usually recommend is that we start to look at things like how many of each item are you selling? Because this is a blanketed entire menu discussion.
Okay. So now I know where you're going here because I love this. I think I know where you're going, Jim. So you're talking about, okay, so I have a burger on the menu. It's $15.99 or $16, whatever. I may not need to bump that, but I have a steak that I could bump it $2,
Right.
right?
There's a bigger threshold on a higher priced item, right? It'd be easier to take an item from $42 to $44 and jump that price by $2 than it would to take a $10 item up $2.
Yep.
You might only be able to take a $10 item up 50 cents. But if you can average that out over the whole menu by 2, 3, 4%, you're going to end up actually coming out ahead at the end of the day.
So
And that's how that strategy is how we get ahead of some of this stuff.
I'm gonna give you a little strategy the old J Meister here used to do. Is that when's the last time you went to a restaurant? Jim goes to restaurants every day. I'm sure you do probably.
Much.
And the server comes up and says, "Okay, can I start you with something to drink?" And you say, "Yeah, I'll grab a Coke Zero, because look at that physique Jim's got. I'll have a Coke Zero." And she goes, "Perfect." So she goes and gets Jim a Coke Zero. You didn't ask the price on your Coke Zero. And I tell you, I used to bank a lot of inflation because it's a high volume is on your beverages. Is I banked a ton in the beverage on my inflation on restaurants, right? Because it's a high volume. Same with coffee. So if it's 85 cents, okay, or 85 cents that we had an increase on that item, on the average, whatever it is per plate, I guess, or per dish, on this, is that I could probably easily do that within the beverage side, and especially when you get into coffee, because your coffee on the when you make a cup of coffee, there's a lot of margin in coffee already.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually bring in a higher quality coffee in your restaurant. Whatever brand it is, get a a roaster in there, or whatever different kinds you have. You can apply that brand to your menu. So you're carrying Jim's Roasters brand out of Vancouver. It's an amazing brand. We brew all these different things, the story behind it. I can easily add $1.50 onto my cup of coffee if now I have a branded coffee in my restaurant that's driving more recognition and brand into it, right? Like there's a strategy there. Because coffee, I tell you, I could usually increase my telling you all my tricks. I used to be able to telling everyone all my tricks. I used to be able to bank the inflation in a restaurant. I could bring back that lost sales, like we talked about earlier. We lose all this money here. I used to be able to bring that back in the beverage, just in the beverage, right?
Yeah,
Because
we,
it
we
was a
call
thing
that
that no one.
we call that an off menu strategy. So basically, any item that you sell that isn't listed on the menu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I find coffee, beverages, pop, those the things out there that no one ever asked. Everyone comes up, y'all, would you like grab some drink? Y'all, I'll grab a Coke, I'll grab a coffee. And it's like, you don't go, well, just wait a second. How much is your Coke? $2.99. Oh, okay. Right now, you do have to be careful that you don't gouge in the beverage space, because when they do get the bill and they look at your Coke, because I have seen this, and it's $5.25, and it was used to be $3. She could be a little painful when you're getting that, but I tell you, you can put a lot of inflation into your beverages.
And if you think about that, going back to this calculator, if you think about that from a percentage perspective,
Yeah.
you could easily take 10% or sometimes 15% on your beverage that's off menu, but it'd be a lot harder to take 10 or 15% in your sandwich or salad section on your menu. You might only be able to take 5% on your sandwiches, but 10, 15 in other categories, like you said. That's how you balance that out.
High volume is what I used to go with. Hey Jim, I used to look at the high volume items. Okay, what's my high items on my volume? Okay, it's the dry ribs. Okay, can I do anything on the dry ribs? Oh, yeah, I can go here on this percentage. Here's what the cost is. You work all your food cost out. Look at what it is. Yeah, I can put some of this, because ideally what this is, where's our inflation rate? So we're losing, what'd you say, $20,000. So a year, let's say 20, 22, 23, $24,000 a year inflation, you're going to lose. That's a lot of money, Jim.
For sure it is.
And if you lose that, you can look at different ways to regain that, right? You can not necessarily to the blanket of the menu, but you can look at your beverage, you can look at your high ticket items. And I have to say, You can be strategic at it that people don't even notice.
Yeah. So let's do a couple of those samples. Do we have time to do that? If we use this to do it individual items. So let's say average, let's pretend that this is just one item. Let's say average monthly sales of Coke, for example.
Okay, do you want me to go into one here? It's got a recipe cost.
Well, you can just stay on that inflation calculator you were looking at. So let's pretend that we're selling just Coke. So maybe you sell $2,000 a month of Coke.
Okay, so let's do 2,000.
So your annual sales are right. Your average guest check. Well, we know that Coke. What are you charging right now? $4 maybe.
Yeah, $4.
$5. Change that to $4.
So where'd you go? $4 here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's the food cost on Coke? I don't know, 5%, 10%, maybe.
I'm gonna say 5. It's fountain pop, Jim. Fountain pop.
Right. So this is telling you that in order to negate the inflation rate on the fountain pop that you have, you only need to increase it by 1 penny, 1 cent. So anything above 1 cent that you increase the price of that on, it's going to chip away at some of the higher more high inflation rate items that you have.
Whoa. Wait a second. Hit the wrong button there. So you're saying that I only have to go up to $4.01?
In order to negate this 7% inflation rate. So what that's telling us is that if you go to $4.25 or $4.50, every Coke you sell, either 24 cents or 49 cents of that is going to go towards beating inflation on other items. So let's go back and do that and pretend it's a steak.
Okay. This is cool. Okay.
So let's say you sell 10,000 or 7,000 a month in steaks.
Okay. What's steak price, Jim?
It's probably $40.
So $40. Okay. So how many did you say you sold? 7,000?
Let's say 7,000.
Okay, $40.
Okay. And your food cost on that item is 40%. So now it's saying in order to negate that inflation rate of 7%, you got to go up $1.10. But we got to remember the fact that the cost of beef is up way more than 7%. So let's say the inflation rate is 15%.
So you want to go on 15 on this? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now this is telling us that, and this brings up a good discussion on the engineering side of things, because this is now telling us that you got to increase your price on that steak by 6% or $2.40 just to break even.
Jeez.
So remember a minute ago, we were saying you can take your steak up $2. Well, now it's saying $2.40 just to keep up with inflation. So this is where, when we start to go through this process, the engineering thing comes up. And is that still the right steak to serve on your menu based on what it costs?
Okay. Just wait a second. But then I call Jim, and Jim says, you know what? I can take your 40% on your steaks down to 35% on your food cost, because we're going to monitor it. We're going to do all these things. So can we play with that, Jim?
Sure.
Jim comes in, shakes the magic wand, boom. Did it do anything?
It did. Now it's $2.10 instead of $2.40.
So you knocked out 30 cents.
30 cents. And how many of those are we selling every year?
So, well, 7,000. That's a lot.
175 a year, 175 a month at 30 cents a piece.
Yep.
Yeah. It adds up.
Adds up lots, dude. So ideally, so we talked about this before we got on the call today, is that you need to not just look at this. This is one of the many things you need to look at based on the inflation, what's happening in our industry right now. Obviously, menu engineering and understanding your cost on everything on your menu is so important, because this is what people are doing, is they're just doing one thing and say, I'm good now. I'm good. I put everything up $2, Jim. I'm good. Not the case, right? Because what I think what's happening is you see a lot of other restaurants, maybe those ones that have multiple locations, won't be doing this. They're strategizing, right? It's a game.
It is. Absolutely. It's definitely a strategy, and it takes time, which is part of the problem right now, is that, our industry is stretched for time. And it takes time to go through every single item on your menu and every recipe on your menu and actually go through that process to make sure that you've got the right strategy, not for the whole menu, but for every item.
Yeah. Is it what else should people be looking at, Jim? So not just this, because I could play with this all day with you. Because this is great. This is
Mhm.
great info. This is great. What's another thing you got to look at this, right? Like, because obviously we won't get into labor. We know labor is chewing away at your
Yeah.
inflation or at your P&L and
Yeah.
your profits, right? Is there other things you can do in just what we see here on this inflation? Because you can adjust your inflation. Your inflation is going to sit at that number. You can't control inflation.
Well, I think, when you ask if there's other things you can do, I mean, in terms of menu specifically, one of the tougher conversations I think that comes up is when you get an item that it's already at a high food cost, it's already, seeing really high inflation rates. And this process tells you that you have to raise your prices to a point where you're not comfortable or you think your customer won't be comfortable. There actually should be some discussion right away about recipe or remove it from the menu altogether. And that's why you're starting to see menus shrink in so many markets, is that there are starting to be certain types of items on menus that just don't make sense anymore.
Mhm. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
So what's
It's
some of those things, Jim? What do you see that nowadays? Like what do you see?
in terms of food still.
Yeah.
Well, I think certain things like, wing nights, for example, where people used to go and have 25, 40, 50 cent wings and that kind of stuff, that all those types of things are going to start to go away, because they not only mess with the menu engineering and pricing side of things, but they start to change the way that the customer behaves and affect the whole profit model of the restaurant. Not to get too much into, other pieces of the P&L, but we were doing a case study on a restaurant not long ago where wing night specifically, one night of the week where it changed the customer's behavior to order differently, was actually affecting their profit margin by 3 or 4 percentage points for the whole month,
No way.
because they ran wing night one night a week every week, and it was
Oh,
causing their labor cost and the whole model to change. So they actually chose to remove that promotion altogether, which ultimately made them more profitable. But it's, some of those engineering things that used to work 5, 10 years ago, they just don't work anymore.
now what if people say, okay, this used to be the biggest thing we used to talk about the wings and stuff. I
Mhm.
make money off the booze. Does that still happen, Jim? Or is that gone too?
You make money off the booze, but if
Is it
let's
eroding?
it is to a degree depending on the market. But let's say, for example, that your average customer spend, like we just looked at, is $35.
Yeah.
Wing night or one of those, really heavy promotions that drive a certain behavior of the customer, they can sometimes impact the customer spend by up to $5 or $6
What?
for that whole day or that whole day part. So maybe it's the whole dinner
Mm.
service. So that just means that in order to get the same level of revenue
Yeah.
that you would get on any other night of the week, you have to sell almost a whole nother drink just to catch up.
No way.
Right. So if it's $6, $7, $8 difference in customer behavior, or that's what I call it, but average spend, really what that's telling you is that to catch back up to where you were the rest of the week, you have to sell every single person one more whole beer before you can get ahead. So it's getting more complicated than it used to be, because you're right. It used to be loss leader, 25 cent wings, and everybody just has 3 or 4 beers. I mean, that was great. But that's when you could actually make money on chicken wings. So the,
Well,
the whole the whole
I
model is
think
different.
I think at the time too, you could also make money on booze, but I think those margins are shrinking. Less people are drinking. It's not the case like it used to be, right?
It's not. Yeah, it's definitely, the model is different, and that's, we kind of continue to say that this is sort of the end of, we've always done it this way. We're at this point in the restaurant industry, right? Because you can't continue to just do the same things you always used to do. It just, the same strategies don't work anymore.
You need to relearn, right? You need to
Mhm.
relearn a lot of
And
stuff. So
and relearn and reassess and investigate, not once a year or once every 2 years, or twice a year. Sorry, it's every quarter or every month, even at this point, the way it's
yeah,
changing.
I would say every month is what I would be definitely. I'd be doing everything, all your checks and balances. And I know it's easy for us to say that, but when you're in the restaurant, it's different. I know you're busy. We all know you're busy. You don't have time for these things. But I tell you, the money that's being lost out the back door or through calculations that are not correct, or you're missing things and opportunities, it's a tough to get back on. I always say after that, if you're looking at this once a quarter, you're going to lose money. Promise you, there's money being lost right now. Same in the
Yeah.
month, like you're losing money, and no one needs any more losing money in these factors. Does these numbers? Another question for you, Jim, before we
Mhm.
wrap up here. But does these numbers account for delivery, takeout? They still play that role?
Well, I mean, the takeout and delivery thing is another
Yeah,
conversation to have, right? I mean, we might need to have another show about that because pricing can be different. There's the surcharge associated with it. There's packaging. The whole model. If you're running a 35% food cost on an item on your menu, and then you have to package it, well, now your food cost just went up because you have to pay for the price of that package, right? So it does. That's a whole nother concept to go through. The one
well,
thing that I always recommend that people are aware of, though, in terms of third-party delivery and takeout, is just it's interesting to watch how, in terms of food specifically, third-party delivery, people tend to spend more on food when they order out than they do when they go to a restaurant.
Okay, just wait a second. You said they order out more when they do takeout?
They spend more per person on food when they order.
Really?
So, okay, so here's a scenario for you. You'll think this is funny. If I was to go to Dairy Queen and go through the drive-through
Okay.
and get a Blizzard, I'm probably getting a medium,
Okay.
right? When I order it at home on movie night, I'm getting the large one because I don't have to face anybody. I'm going to order the bigger one. And we see that happen all the time. There's more add-ons that happen for takeout. There's the extra appy that happens on takeout. There's people definitely spend more on food when they order third-party delivery. So that changes that dynamic a little bit too. You have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, and I think when there's a whole we could have a whole show on third party delivery because I think also the benefits of good pictures, good items, get all those things on your app can
Mhm.
entice people because that's the menu of today, right? The swiping, the looking,
Sure.
and I don't think people are paying enough attention. They use those apps a lot to what those things look like on a phone. It's different in picture, but on a phone,
Mhm.
what it looks like, and I do agree. I do buy more when I do buy it on the app than in the restaurant.
Yeah.
You're
Next
absolutely
time you
right.
order
It's
on,
easy. It's
on one
easy.
of those apps, you're going to think about it.
It's so easy. That's the thing, too, right? It's add, add, add. It's good, right? And the justification through your mind process pretty fast,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's really cool. So, anyways, folks, a couple things to take away from today. Like Jim said, look at your cost. Look at these kind of things, like these kind of use these kind of tools. You can Google them or check with your sales rep. Everyone's got these nowadays. But use a tool like this to look at your inflation rate. I'm blown away, Jim, just on this one. You don't have to do those big increases like everyone thinks you have to.
Mhm.
So it does help.
For sure.
The labor one might be a little different calculator than we'd use here, but that's a tough space too to
It
look
is.
at.
Yeah. We could have another full show or two shows on that one for sure.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be that's where I'm seeing a lot of the focus now is on the labor. And do now, Jim, just briefly on the labor and things like that.
Mhm.
Do you see what's happening today? We hear the shortage of labor and everything. Is that in a crazy way maybe benefiting people in a way? I know it sounds crazy. Everyone's gonna be like, Jay, you're losing it. But is it kind of in a way because you're not having to hire all these people? There's no one there to hire in a sense. It's because you're gonna be paying big dollars on that.
It's, I don't know if I would say it's benefiting people.
It's the
Um,
it's the
you
right
know,
word.
there's some savings associated with not spending money on training.
Oh, okay.
The amount of money that's being spent with recruiters and on ads and on overtime pay and all
Yeah.
of it far outweighs what it would cost to hire people.
So
So
you're losing the sales on the individual more than anything nowadays.
yeah, and then there's restaurants that, I mean, how many places have you seen that have adjusted their hours based on the fact that they don't have the people to be open? So on top of it, you're losing revenue. So I don't think that a lack of workers is benefiting very many places.
So
It might have forced them to look at their model differently, which could long term benefit. There is that happening for sure.
Jim, have you ever worked on that model before with like the amount of labor people per restaurant that you need to run based on your profitability? Like you must work on that before.
Yeah, we do that type of stuff every day. We look at metrics that show us how productive the business is per person and per station and overall. And then we also look at things like employee workload to protect how hard your team has to work in order to achieve whatever result it is that you're wanting to achieve, so that you prevent burnout and reduce turnover, so that you can actually stay ahead of that for your people, because we see that happening a lot right now too, right? People are just getting just exhausted.
Yeah. And then your service quality goes down, everything else goes down, right?
Yeah. So typically, a good analogy for that, just to sort of tell you this really quick, is that if let's pretend that you work in a Jay is a worker in a factory, that there's a conveyor belt going across in front of you, and your job is to stand in front of this conveyor belt and put labels on beer cans as they go by, or Coke cans, pop cans. That's your job, is to put labels on cans. There's a certain speed that conveyor belt can go across in front of you, where you do a good job of getting the labels on all the cans. They're smooth, they're on there properly, they're not wrinkled. Every can gets one. There's none that are upside down or anything. You still get your lunch break. You get to, work through the day at a reasonable pace, right?
Mm-hmm.
The company still makes money. The customer gets a good, consistent experience in their product because the labels are all on the cans properly. But if for some reason, either something internally, like the manager cranked up the speed of the conveyor belt, or something external caused the speed to increase, all of a sudden you wouldn't be able to get those labels on those cans in the same way as you could before, right? You might make some mistakes. You might miss a can altogether. Some of them are wrinkled or kind of, off a little bit. And that starts to affect the whole model. The customer doesn't get the same quality experience. The profit margins start to shrink because there's errors and returns. The manager gets frustrated with your quality of work. And ultimately you can't keep up. You get stressed out and potentially probably quit to go find a job that that's a little bit better for you. So there's the same type of thing can be looked at in a restaurant, where there's an optimal speed for the way the business runs, where it's all in unison and things are working properly. So we help restaurants with that all the time.
It's huge, Jim. I can listen to you talk about this stuff all the time. So thank you again for being on the show today, and just thanks for all the help restaurants around there, and to everyone else. I'm blown away. Sorry, Jim. I'm sometimes speechless, and this is one of those times. It's just listening to you, just my process of what we have to do out there. And here's the one thing I'm going to leave this with everyone, is that use people like Jim if you can. Just the more you can educate yourself every day, learn something about your business or about the industry, because it is changing at light speed, by the way, if you haven't noticed. Is you got to learn and listen to all as much as you can, and relearn, learn, forget. I think they learn, forget, relearn. And I think that we all can do that and take something away. So, Jim, thanks again. To everyone else, we're back again tomorrow with Chef Poyen. The seafood on a budget dishes could be interesting, Jim. Going to bring some of that margin there, buddy. Right? Chef Poyen's going to do that from your neck of the woods. He's in Vancouver as well. And then on Wednesday, we have Foodies and Cars with Chef Jeanette in Toronto. Thursday, tech is back. We're going to do a little tech with the folks at App 8 in Modern. Alex is on the show again. I haven't seen Alex in a long time. And then Friday, we're back with Influencer Fridays. Sterno is in the house. I always love when Chef Boyd brings in Sterno, because you just don't know what he's going to do. And then we have our last, you just don't know what he's going to be. And then our last show on Friday is a killer of a show. When we have what's our show on Friday? Show on Friday is Affinity. That's right. Recipes on a budget. Boom. Yeah, we're all thinking about cost. We're all trying to come up with ideas to help people save money and make more. So thanks, Jim. All the things you do is just outstanding, and congratulations on your success too, Dad. Everyone else, have a great rest of your day, and tune in tomorrow. Cheers.